find adventure at the click of a button, or from the turn of a page, or the casting of a die. Join your hosts, Conniff and Shiloh, on an unforgettable journey. Questing the Multiverse. Shiloh, when you're at a picnic, a potluck, a barbecue, whatever you have in Tennessee, and you may have brought a dish, and you're like, yeah, that's my thing. And all the little old ladies are like, oh, Chris, like, we just love your crispy duck. And you're like, oh, thanks, Shirley. It's my specialty. I've been making it since you were in World War II, probably. So when you're at one of those situations, do you like to eat dessert, or do you just like to eat more of like the main meal, the sides, the meats, all that stuff? Like, do you save room for dessert, or do you just say, like dessert is just, it's dessert, you know?
I can't think of the last time I was at a quote unquote potluck, but I'm gonna use our family get-togethers as a
that works.
I generally go for side items the most.
This is why I like you.
Yeah, just because they're usually varied so much, and I don't know. I enjoy side items more than proteins and stuff. It'd be really hard for me to completely go on a, what is it, paleo diet?
Yes. Something
all you
like
use
that.
Meat. Yeah.
Oh, no, is that paleo?
No.
It's
No, it's not paleo.
something Cash did. What was it called? It's not the gluten-free. It's the keto. That's the one.
Keto. Yeah, I couldn't do that.
Yeah,
It would
me
be
neither.
it's too expensive, number one. Just eating a bunch of meat all the time.
I also like a lot of flavors, so it's like just one meat, just meat all the time, nothing else. Nothing else adds, like you can't like balance with all these other items, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, cheeses and dairy and...
Yeah. But if you were to ask Meemaw, that's a whole different can of worms. So.
I don't...
Meemaw would introduce everyone to her raisin bran casserole. It's so good, y'all. Raisin bran, marshmallow fluff, some of those crispy onions from French's can.
On the marshmallow fluff? I thought we left Mima in West Virginia. But I guess not. So
she comes with me to work sometimes. So
when you're really not
with Meemaw.
when you're just ready to let loose the sass. So I know you're dying to know what brought this comment on and this question, and it's because Tempest, our dear friend from the paradise down under, not Australia, because Australia is full of evil, wicked things, not people necessarily, but creatures that want to kill people, like spiders,
Kangaroos,
koala
bears,
dingoes,
sloths.
I was thinking like spiders, poisonous snakes, maybe other poisonous, creepy animals. Tempest is from New Zealand, and he sent me a picture of a hot chocolate tart that he made from presumably from scratch. And I told him it looked delightful. And then he was saying, he's like, yeah, I don't have much of a sweet tooth. I can't even do his accent. He's like, I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but I could probably make this again. That was Australian. And
it was pretty Australian.
That was man, I can't do it. New Zealand is like,
it's just very British.
It is very British, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So it looked great, and then it got me thinking that, when I go like when it comes to desserts, I like trying desserts. But like in an instance, like for instance, if you went to a restaurant and they were like, this is what you order, it comes with this dessert, 9 times out of 10, I would probably want, just instead of the dessert, more of whatever it was I ordered. I don't know why, but that's just, like, I just could pass on the dessert and I'd be like, yes, I would just like more steak or more Baja tacos or whatever the example would be.
I like just little bits of things, and it's probably because it's what I end up doing or what I do for a career, but
Yeah.
yeah, I really do have a sweet tooth, especially since I quit drinking. It's been kind of my indulgence here and there. It's kind of like, well, okay, I treat myself with dessert.
I traded in the rum and the whiskey
of rum, yeah,
for chocolate cake.
yeah, a pirate's life.
Are you a fan of fruitcake? Is anybody a fan of fruitcake?
I don't think so. There's an Italian. What is it called? Panettone, maybe. I think that's
That
what it's
sounds
called.
familiar. And it's like a bread, though, right?
It's almost like a little dried fruit bread, and it's better than fruitcake. I think fruitcake is just kind of weird. It's almost like a compressed
Nasty
sauce or some sort of pate. Like, it's just weird. I don't like it.
I feel that. Well, that's one dessert I could do without, but it's a tradition too.
Yeah, I don't even know if you can classify it as dessert. It's kind of more of a monstrosity.
It's just an abomination.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah,
aside from desserts and other foods and whatnot, what have you been up to this past week? Anything? And this is the last week before your lengthy staycation.
Yeah, it's my official first day of my staycation, which has been fairly uneventful, which is exactly the way I wanted it. And just kind of resting up and getting ready for the adventures at hand. I don't have a whole lot on the docket, but
Gotcha.
Again, that's the way I've planned it. So, or it's just the way it's going to have to be. I've been busy with house, not really hunting this week, but kind of managing emails and stuff like that, just trying to find what's out there. And I'm kind of running into some brick walls because I don't know how much you know about the housing
I just know
stuff,
it blows.
real estate, whatever, but there's a type of house that I think I would like and the type of loan that I'm pretty much eligible for, and they do not exist in the same
Category.
In the same universe, yeah. Same multiverse, there you go. But it's so that's a little bit
House
frustrating.
hunting the multiverse.
Yeah, because most of the loans are, the banks generally own the house.
Yeah.
Because you're not putting up a whole lot of money up front, so you're getting this huge substantial loan. So the banks want everything tip-top shape, and the windows, everything needs to be within specifications. So, and I'm looking for something. I don't really care if I need to renovate and remodel. In fact, I almost prefer that. So I see these little houses and I'm like, oh, I could do this and that and that. And, because I can bring in my family cast and crew to hopefully I can bring my family cast and crew in to help me do X and Z and whatever else that needs to be done to make the house in my quote unquote vision. And those two worlds are not colliding exactly. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm just going to hold out. So, not going to rush into anything that I'm like, oh, I really wish I'd done something different. I don't want to be stuck with a house that I don't really want. So
That's been built upon a ancient Indian burial ground.
yeah, well, at least that would have some character. Albeit haunted and cursed, but
Never a dull day in Shiloh's life.
yeah, that and lots of New World. That's been primarily what I've been playing gaming-wise, so just trying to gear up for the expansion. It comes out on Tuesday. Hopefully it comes out on Tuesday. We'll have to wait and see. It's their first paid expansion, so we'll hold with bated breath. So
Okay, so maybe not what you've been up to then, but what aspirations do you have gaming-wise for this staycation?
for the staycation, finish
Yes.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay.
dive a little farther into Starfield than I have with my quote unquote new character slash direction that I want to go with that. And then play the new expansion for New World. And that, gaming wise, I think that covers that's enough, really. Just finishing Baldur's Gate 3 is a tall order in and of itself, you know that, but
yes.
And then spending a good amount of time in Starfield is, again, another tall order. So yeah. What about you?
Well, I had a busy week outside of gaming, honestly. Outside of this podcast, it was my youngest son's first birthday party yesterday. So my parents were in town with my brother, and we basically were nonstop doing stuff with them, doing stuff for the party. And then today we went to another friend's youngest's first birthday. So a lot of babies and birthdays. And then outside of babies and birthdays, I interviewed for a job, a new position on my current team. So with the same people. There's a lot of stiff competition for it, so I'm not sure I will get it. I'm hopeful, but at the same time, it's like I'm pretty realistic in what to expect. So again, I'm not like holding my breath, and it's not like where I really need this job. It would just be a really nice upgrade. So
yeah,
we'll see.
But then, if you need any Nancy Kerrigan work, I've got a crowbar.
I probably will.
I don't think that'll stop them from getting I got the job, but I have my broken shin.
Knees.
I can't figure skate anymore.
Yeah, no. Aside from that, Shiloh's not actually going to show up and beat
weird
people with
ice
crowbars.
Figure skating hitman.
After staring into their house for 3 hours a day for the past 2 months.
I'm not Tanya Harding, so be all right.
Aside from those things, and in the game sphere, I've not played a ton. I don't know. I've played a little Sea of Thieves. I play that with my college buddies, and I finally got enough gold to where I can buy my own captained brigantine. So it's like 375,000 gold. And anyone out there that really plays Sea of Thieves is probably like, what? Like, that's all? Because they're busy getting 100 to 200,000 gold each time they go on whatever sea expedition. Well, me and my friends, we play this, and this is a deep take or deep cut. We play this like the pirates from Veggie Tales from the 90s who don't do anything. And their song was something like, "We are the pirates who don't do anything. We just stay at home and lie around." And that's pretty much what we do. We get on the boat. I get a quest from one of the merchants at the outpost. And then we just set sail, and they drink grog and fish, and I pilot or captain the ship into storms and have a blast. And so I played with Tempest and Goo earlier this past week, and we actually did a little more pirating than drunk sailing, as it were, in game.
Yeah.
And other than that, I've been playing Guild Wars 2. Now, I will get to the whole New World thing, because I did play some New World. We'll get there. I see what you've put on the notes here, you little sneaky guy. And we'll get there. But Guild Wars 2, I am in Dragon's End, which is the final zone for the End of Dragons campaign. I think I'm on chapter 14 out of 15, so 2 more chapters and I'll be done with that. Then I can start Gala Delve, and then once I enter Gala Delve, so I'm actually very close to having 100%ed every single zone in the game as far as zone exploration goes. The only two I have left are Dragon's End and Gala Delve. I've done New Kainang City. I finished Ekavald Wilds yesterday, which that's a really neat zone. It feels like Tangled Depths in a way, not just the maze-like nature of it, but that it is very deadly, especially as an elementalist to walk around. So I've just been hitting up Guild Wars 2, having a blast, and what's good about that is I can kind of shut my brain off and just enjoy the ride. And so that's been a ton of fun, and especially with how busy outside of gaming life has been, that's been quite enjoyable. So that's really it. It's just been another week of busyness, and I don't think it's going to slow down too much, because the closer we get to the holidays, the busier everything gets. So
nice.
C'est la vie, as they say. What do we got here? News stories.
Oh, right.
Since you're the one who filled out these show notes this time, I'm going to let you captain the ship while I drink grog in the hold, and then fish and fall off the boat and get eaten by a megalodon. So
all right.
That's my plan. There's no grog being drunk, by the way. This is a family show.
Oh, whatever. All right, so the first bit of news we've got, Eve Vanguard has been announced, and this kind of it's another one of those resurgence of news.
Okay.
Because have you ever played Eve Online?
I am kind of afraid of playing Eve Online.
Yeah, me too. Most people are, for good reason.
Yeah, it just seems like a ton of work. Like, you know how like we joke about other games being lifestyle games, like, oh yeah, like, you know, Bungie just wants everyone to treat Destiny 2 like it's their lifestyle game. Like, this is the game I get off work and I go play. This is the game I play with, hang out with my friends on. This is the game that I do when Uncle Bungie shows up at my door at 1 a.m. with assault rifles. And so that's what Eve, like, I feel like Eve is like the embodiment of a lifestyle game, with how much money I've heard is like real money, real world money is involved in that game. So
yeah, it's very economy driven. You would need someone like our friend Sonny Ravencourt
to kind of master the economy,
an economist with a cutthroat personality and a eye for all things sci-fi and space to really make this game your go-to. But it's a beautiful game. I mean, it was back in it's an old game and it's still gorgeous. But anyway, there was a long time ago. There was maybe not a long time ago. It depends on your idea of time, but a while ago, we'll just say, there was a lot of talk of CCP, who's the creator, an Icelandic developer for EVE Online.
Okay.
The only game they really have on their resume, I believe. But they were going to release a kind of an FPS that was directly connected to EVE Online, so you could send ground forces from your ships and your corporations in EVE Online to do these things. And there was a lot of talk that it was going to be on the Xbox as well, which got me excited. I'm like, well, I'm not a big fan. I mean, I like EVE Online. It's just not for me. I don't have the time or patience or
and you're also not
a
huge first-person shooter.
Yeah, but the first-person shooter element actually got me interested.
Oh, okay.
Because it was sort of almost a Destiny-esque kind of game in essence. Because you were running these missions and you would join a corporation, and so you were contributing to what the world of EVE Online. And I like that idea of having a game and then another game that interacted with each other. I really, really enjoy that. Like, I don't think it's really been done that I can think of, where, say, a game like well, let's just say World of Warcraft, where if they actually could put another game that, directly connected to World of Warcraft that you could, interact with and benefit from your actual World of Warcraft characters or whatever, or your guilds and blah, blah, blah.
That's a whole freaking, write that down, because that's a topic that I've been on a rant about how Blizzard is literally just squandering that IP, because they could literally build any other game set with some of those characters in that world, and I think it would be a hit. But
yeah,
I will step off that soapbox and allow you.
Well,
to
maybe
get back to it.
I would, if anybody were to do something like this besides CCP, I would consider like a company like Riot. Would be probably the forefront runner to actually do something like this. But
yeah,
evidently it's going to be CCP. So this is taking a new breath of air, kind of like the Amazon Lord of the Rings MMO that we've heard off and on and off and on.
That
so
old
thing is,
old battle axe,
that old chestnut. But this is evidently going to be a thing. So CCP has announced EVE Vanguard at EVE FanFest 2023, which is currently taking place in Iceland. So it's in Reykjavik. And so this has been formally announced, and the trailer looks good. It's a dynamic and evolving shooter. Players will take on the role of the Vanguard, a new generation of war clones fighting for their survival and to free their consciousness as they undertake hazardous contracts on the planets of New Eden. So, pretty interesting. In squads or solo, players will deploy onto the surface of planets racked with turmoil and littered with opportunity. To advance their clone suit and equipment, players will need to complete missions, acquire resources, and engage in tactical combat with rival Vanguard squads, as well as hostile forces, each with their own agenda. So it sounds like, in theory, and I haven't seen any screenshots. I haven't even watched the trailer for it.
This is like out of left field again,
Yeah, it's just like, well, okay, this is actually going to happen. I don't know if it's going to come to console. That seems a little far-fetched because CCP doesn't have any...
Well, EVE Online's not on console, is it?
No, and it's not. And it probably will never be. It's
probably
just way too complicated for that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
Well, that next paragraph on that article that you linked is what I think is the true... That's the hook right there, is that what happens in Vanguard apparently is going to influence events in EVE Online through a mechanic called frontline corruption. And then they're going to add more. They use the word interoperability. That's a new one. But interoperability, they're going to add more of that later on. That's fascinating to me. And that's where I think what you said with Riot makes a lot of sense, because I could totally see Riot Games, like when their MMO comes out, I could see them having, let's just picture here, like a tavern with a bunch of say in Piltover, where there's technology and stuff, with game tables where you could play League of Legends inside of the MMO. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this in a certain sort of way. But it's fascinating to me that what happens in Vanguard will affect the EVE Online universe, because what that tells me is that there's going to be a ton of those big high dollar corporations that are just going crazy, with getting squads together, planning out these massive coordinated whatever on New Eden.
Yeah,
that sounds really exciting, honestly.
Yeah, and if you think about it, you could have you could have really, really high end FPS gamers almost act as mercenaries, for these corporations. You want me to be part of your corporation? Well, it's going to cost you, that sort of thing. Because there's a lot of people have a lot of time and money invested in EVE Online.
Yeah.
although it's not one of these huge powerhouse MMOs by any stretch of the imagination, it is very, very driven by their player base. So very, very interesting story, and we'll have to see how that all pans out.
Yeah.
But so the next bit of news, it's not really a bit of news, but I just wanted to throw this game out there that's been on my watch list and has something. I think the theme of this game is really neat, and it's very New World centric, is what we're going to talk about later in the episode. But the game Nightingale, and I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for anyone that hasn't heard. You've probably maybe seen stuff on this game. I know that you have.
Is this the game, Shiloh, that like in our Discord, like the beginning of 2023, maybe late 2022, someone posted a link to like sign up for the newsletter or something?
Possibly.
But like the web page was like a secret code that you had to unlock. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that might have been Nightingale.
Okay. Or there's something else out there that that is, and then we're gonna see. But it looks similar. That's why I ask. So
yeah, it's what it is. It's a shared world survival crafting game.
Okay.
It's got almost a colonial Fey vibe to it, where there's similar to New World, where there's pistols and muskets and
gotcha.
But there's also Fae that are running rampant, and different environments that you go through. You go through these portals, and it's also a survival crafting game that you can play with your friends. It's supposed to also come out on consoles. So this is the kind of description from the actual website. Set out on a journey of survival and adventure into the mysterious and dangerous Fey realms of Nightingale. Become an intrepid realm walker and venture forth alone or with friends as you explore, craft, build, and fight across a visually stunning gas lamp fantasy world. So it's got a little steampunky vibe to it as well.
Yeah.
It just looks really, really neat. There's a card element to the game as well, where you collect these cards that look very similar to tarot cards or something like that, that play into the game somehow, that unlock these portals to different worlds or realms, and you can kind of gather up a little adventure team and go explore these areas. So
you know what this is sounding like, Shiloh?
What?
Remnant 2 in a way.
Yeah, it is very Remnant 2. And I don't know, except with crafting, and it's more kind of survival-esque. So it looks amazing. It looks really, really cool. The character models are a little strange looking, but they're
definitely like
unique
caricatures. Like they're kind of, I don't know how to explain it. Actually, kind of the characters look, or at least remind me of like We Happy Few or BioShock style characterization. So that's pretty neat. Huh? Yeah. When's this come out? Do we know?
Well, we don't know. So I just wanted to kind of throw this out there. It's definitely on my watch list to kind of keep track of, because I have been interested in this game, but I just don't know if it's in alpha or beta or when that's coming out, or where is it? So I'll have to wait and see.
Well, that's fascinating.
I'll post stuff in the QTM info links about it, and so you can check it out.
Put that on the radar. I had the last news thing here, and I don't have a link for it because it's just, you just type in the name and bada bing, bada boom, the internet will tell you all you need to know. But PlayStation's Jim Ryan is retiring. So it'd be kind of like the same if Phil Spencer from Xbox was retiring, but Jim Ryan is the huge... a huge reason why Sony is where it's at. Although he's had some, of course, like this is coming from an Xbox fan, but he's had some dumb takes, particularly the one about backwards compatible games. Like it's just common sense that yes, Jim, Mr. Ryan, people want to play games they played 20 years ago today. is a huge nostalgia factor. And so anyway, that's one of his dumb takes. But you can't argue with the success that Sony has had on the PlayStation market. I'm pretty sure that console has beat Xbox ever since like I don't think it beat the 360 with the PlayStation 2. But like since the PlayStation 3 and then the 4 and now the 5, I think they've been ahead of Xbox in sales each time. So it's fascinating. End of a 30, it looks like 30-year run. So we'll see what Sony does, or who takes over as CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment. But he was only around. Oh, he took over as CEO in 2019. Okay. But he's been with Sony like a few months before the launch of the PlayStation in 1994. So he's been a huge part of Sony's success. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with PlayStation. Because, as much as we have been on Team Xbox for a very long time, you look at it and you're like, man, if I would just that day you made that decision to buy your Xbox One or whatever it was, like the day I made the decision to buy an Xbox One versus a PS4, like if I would have made the opposite decision, my entire gaming sphere would just be completely different. The type of people, you just look at it like it was just, I didn't make it because I was loyal to Xbox all those years ago. It was just, I had like maybe one or two friends that were played on Xbox, and I was like, yep, I want to play that game with that friend. And then the rest is history. So,
yeah, I think, my first console, definitely Xbox console, was the 360. And I bought it because of Fable.
So you were buying it because of a franchise.
Yeah, I guess so. And I just never really looked back since. I think before that, the only console I had owned was a PS2. So there you go. The rest is history. So.
And you've since
and
owned
I've
a
stayed with
PlayStation
Xbox
4
because they play nice with PC because it's Microsoft. So that's been and going forward, I don't see that ever changing. So
yeah, that's true.
I just have to wait a while, years sometimes, for Sony to give up the rights so I can play their games on PC, but that's whatever.
I still need to play Last of Us and the Horizon games. So someday, both of those are on Steam now. So it's more of a not a if,
just like
it's more
price
of a win.
reduction kind of thing.
Yeah. So all right, I think it's time to unveil this bad boy.
Uh-oh.
Tell me, have you heard the tale of a land of magic beyond the veil, where ships are lost in search of a pearl, lost in madness their lies? Oh, tell me, have you heard the tale of a land of magic beyond the veil, where ships are lost in search of a pearl, lost in madness there lies the new world.
So back in the lands of old, after sailing from the Great Britain, actually I think do they call it like England? I don't know. I set sail on a sloop out of London to head towards the Americas, and our ship encountered this crazy red fog and storm halfway across our journey, and the next thing I knew, I was awakening on a beach in my skivvies after a night of drinking, as one does. And I was attacked by a fellow crewmate who had gone mad with blue magic. And then we met up this Thorpe fellow, and he's a real right bastard, and now we're changing to an Australian accent because just like in New World, there's a mixture of accents and characters and all sorts of cultures. I've got a lot to say about this game, Shiloh. I don't know if you're ready for this. But
all right, I'm seated. Well, I'm seated. There we go.
Yeah, sit down, grab yourself a coffee, another coffee perhaps. Maybe get a blanket. How long you got? No. So that song is something that I wrote for New World and for our pals Cash and Jibs when they were launching Lore Seekers New World. And the little premise that I've kind of, and I guess it's really the tutorial of the game too, kind of wrapped into one. That was a very interesting hook, I think, to me at the time, is that, you know, like, this is effectively an island out of time. So for those who've watched Lost, you could kind of equate it to the Lost Island. Or like the Bermuda Triangle, like that type of stuff. Like there's this mysterious location, and any ship that travels near there ends up crashing, and then you kind of show up on this island, and then you like die. And of course, they built in their game, like when something dies, Azoth. Like it fades into Azoth, but then it gets resurrected. So it's like a built-in like explanation with the lore of how the world, like how your player can just die and then come back and so on and so forth. But then there's this thing called the corruption, and it makes you go mad, and it's red. It's not blue, it's red. That's the color.
Red, yeah.
So anyway, it was a fascinating premise. And I have a few problems with it, but not because of the premise. I have a few problems with the game, not because of the premise. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what it was like when this game launched. And then, so this is for the listener. And then Shiloh's going to talk about what's been added since launch and go into his experience, having never played it at launch and only started playing it this year, and how different of an experience mine versus his turned out to be. And then we'll probably just talk about that, and then talk about Angry Earth, and then continue on to some other stuff. But when we were first looking at it, and you jumped into the beta, they did like the open beta, and it was huge, and all this, like, all the streamers and content creators are like, yeah, a new MMO, and it looks great, it sounds great, blah, 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 this is going to be great. There was a bit of that, like, early excitement, especially when the day it dropped, everyone's rushing to get their character name. You're sitting in a queue of like 1,000 to 5,000 people at times to try to get into the server that you chose. And then you finally, get into the game, and, you're off to the races. There's people everywhere. And I think back then you could get dropped in one of 3 starting zones. So it was like Monarch Bluffs, Restless Shore? No. Not Restless Shore. Monarch Bluffs, First Light, which is changing, so that's a whole thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's like one other one. I don't remember. It's
up to the west.
Off to the west, yeah.
Oh, not Cutlass. But
no, it's north of Cutlass.
To the north.
It's I don't know what it is.
I don't really have that area explored all the way through. So
I got dropped off in First Light, so that was my whole thing, and you'd get dropped off there. And for those that played beta, we kind of had an idea of what we wanted to do. So this game also has skill leveling, not dissimilar to what RuneScape has, where like you'll have wood cutting, or I think it's just called logging, and you level up by cutting down trees. The higher level you have, the higher tier tree you can cut down. And in turn, that wood is used for higher tier artisan skills like weaponsmithing or whatever it is. I don't remember the exact terminology, but like engineering and what else.
Yeah.
And so the hook and the kind of the drive is there, especially as someone who played RuneScape all those years ago. The irony in this is that New World actually got me back into RuneScape for like the first time in 10 years. And then I ended up maxing in RuneScape long after I had stopped playing New World. So thank you, New World, I guess. But you get dropped in, you start to just explore Aeternum and see what the world had to offer. And so leveling from 1 to 10 was a really exciting prospect, because it could have been a little of everything, like exploration. And since the weapons are on their own leveling track, like you could have a level 20 rapier now and then like a level 1 fire staff if you just literally never used a fire staff. So I really like that too. And so a lot of level 1 to 10 was like, okay, which weapon do I actually want to use? And maybe experimenting with a few of them, finding that one, or maybe you found like a decent roll on or a drop or something. You're like, yeah, I'm going to use this spear that I just picked up, and the spear's pretty fun and you're really having a good time. And then you get, you finally find, and this wasn't in that launch, but like a void gauntlet, and you pick that up and you're like, oh, this is neat. And then you start using that a bunch. And so that was kind of the early leveling experience, is getting your feet wet, getting acquainted with the game, discovering all the different little bits and pieces about like how crafting worked, how gathering, played into crafting, maybe even fishing. I don't think I ever really did fishing. I don't remember, but fishing worked with this. And they've added music playing, and I think you're going to get into that, but all this stuff, like the level 1 to then 10 to then 20 experience was sublime, because that was where the game shined. You had players everywhere, max server with players all in the same areas, so you'd constantly run into other players. Some of it was a bit unfortunate, like you'd be competing for a certain like elite mob to spawn in a cave, like an elite bear or something that you needed for a quest, and that was no fun. But the whole community aspect of like being there, and there's other players in the same boat as you, there's people in your Discord racing to level 60 and then never touching the game again after a week. that speaks to itself. But it was a ton of fun, and then it just wasn't for me. I get to level 30 and then the grind kicks in. And back then you spent a ton of time in the haunted zone. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like north of Everfall. And then there's the zone that's just east of that's north of Reekwater. If you remember these names, feel free to shout them out. I don't, because it's been a while. But they had the same vibe where they were kind of like haunted zones. And you spent a lot of time in those zones doing a lot of quests where you go and talk to this person, they send you to a location, you either kill a bunch of different enemies, or a bunch of the same enemy, like kill 5 corrupted zombies or corrupted farmers or whatever, or you need to kill this particular person to get a specific drop and then take it back to that person. And you would do that over and over and over and over, 2,000 years later, over and over and over again. And it was just really repetitive. And so remember, listener, I had just dived back into RuneScape. And if there's one thing RuneScape is actually really good at that a lot of people don't give it credit for, is the quest design. The quest design in RuneScape is very different from other games, and it's even very different from itself at times. Or like sometimes your quest entails finding a way to poison a meat pie so you can poison the mayor of this town, or maybe it's figuring out how to grow. I literally froze because you remember this conversation we had about the word herb and herb?
Mm-hmm.
I just froze because my mind could not decide which of those to say in the sentence. So anyway, maybe one of the quests is you're teaching a troll how to grow herbs on top of a mountain. Man, I really choked that out. I don't like that word. We're gonna skip over that word from now on. We're gonna do that every time.
It's gonna be all right.
So the quests in New World really let me down because I didn't feel attached to the story. I didn't feel attached to any of the characters, and I didn't feel attached to my purpose on the island. Like you play Final Fantasy XIV very quickly, especially because the whole like Cataclysm event in that game is only like 5 years old at that point. So everything's very fresh, and everything that characters talk about around you is like with the backdrop of this giant world-ending event that happened that just so happened to be when they nuked the servers the first time. That's whatever. Well, like you get into Guild Wars 2, and very quickly you realize like the whole dragon situation going on with Zaitan. You get into World of Warcraft, and depending on which world-ending event you are playing in, like it gets into it very quickly. Like what was it? The BFA Battle for Azeroth. You're very quickly introduced to Jaina Proudmoore if you've never played, like you and I, and her role in Borealis and that whole area.
Right.
And the battle between the Alliance and the Horde and whatever. Or even a better example is, what was the expansion you played through in WoW? The Legion. That probably has one of the best opening missions / story cutscenes in any MMO. It's very iconic too. And so there just was none of that in New World. And so for me, that experience of going from really ESO, because I had been playing ESO on Xbox and PC a little, which is, to its credit, story driven in a lot of cases, to then this New World that was a bunch of fetch quests, go kill this 10 times quests, and so on and so forth. It was exhausting. So that's kind of, for you, Shiloh, and our listeners who've never played, that's kind of the picture painted of what New World's launch was. It was a great skeleton of a game, even like a great body, with like the world that they created, the different characters, not characters, but the different like enemy factions, like the Angry Earth, the Corrupted. There's another one that I can't think of. The Lost. All this stuff, right? Great, like all the trappings are there, but it just felt like there was no soul into it. Like the purpose, your character's purpose wasn't there, other than to like, and that maybe was the problem for me, is like everybody's purpose in that game was to level up to 60 to get good gear. Like that's not what entices me to play a game. What entices me to play a game is when my character exists in this world. Like just today in Guild Wars 2, I was in a certain mission in a certain expansion, without spoilers, and Kaith was there, and I stumble upon her as I'm doing map completion. Now, at this point in my experience in Guild Wars 2, my character may as well be like as famous as like Elon Musk or Mother Teresa or Gandhi at this point, right? And I'm not comparing those three people. Don't get me wrong. I'm just using names that most people know. I could have said Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift if that would have appeased everyone. But my character strolls up, on my my Raptor or whatever, and this other, like this little interaction between Kaith and this random NPC start. And this random NPC is going on about how he's read about Kaith in these books and what she's done with Aurene. And there is some funny commentary there because the character calls Aurene Doreen. And then also is like, is it true that like you laid an egg to hatch Aurene? So, but like the way he's fawning over Kaith being this living legend in this world, because he's part of this order that is devoted their life to protecting her and Aurene, or it's more like a fancy fan club of like scholars and stuff, but you still get the point.
Yeah.
Like there was none of that part in New World with my character. My character just existed to run around, chop trees, and help people with their menial problems.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's bad. I am saying that was a negative thing for me personally. And that was at launch. And, you know, I know that they've changed some things. And certainly Brimstone Sands, as I've been told, is a lot more story-centric. But that's the picture. It's the nice or not so nice Bob Ross painted canvas of New World at launch. Why don't you take the microphone, Shiloh, and tell our listeners where it's at now, what's happened since, and where it's at now?
Yeah, so I knew going into the game all of the above that you just stated. It was kind of a known fact, at least in my in our circles, in my personal head, that I had an idea of what New World was about, or at least some of the drawbacks and all of that, basically everything you just said. And so, but still I was like, well, I want to try it because I have played almost every MMO since 2000, so I wanted to give it a shot. Plus, it was on sale on Steam for $19. So, well, might as well. I had a gift certificate from Christmas, so I played it. I played it by myself and got into it. Got a character to 40-ish, and then something else came along, and this was post when we were playing WoW, probably before we came back to Guild Wars 2. And once I went back to Guild Wars 2, well, all bets were off. I was going to finish what I had started and get through End of Dragons and basically do what you're doing now. And so I put that aside. Recently, one of our communities has decided, well, we're going to go back to New World. And so I rolled up a new character on a different server, and just, you know, it's been not well documented, but it's been documented in Questing the Multiverse that I've been playing New World a lot. And
Yeah.
I've been having a lot of fun. I can totally get what you're saying with not really feeling impactful in the world. My character doesn't really feel nearly as impactful as, say, any of my handful of Guild Wars 2 characters that I generally alternate between stories and just pretend like there's some sort of continuity. Same could be said for Final Fantasy, most definitely, because it is so story-driven. But at the same time, I kind of dig not just being like the commander, or in Final Fantasy, it would just be the reason why we all exist. You know, basically you're the god tier savior of Eorzea. So it's kind of refreshing, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't have the story hooks of, say, Guild Wars, certainly not Final Fantasy 14 as far as an MMO goes, but I have enjoyed the overarching lore and environment of the game enough to where it is compelling, and it has kind of driven me forward. That being said, the leveling process is it's been flushed out, and really, really good now. Like a lot of us got to 1 to 60, and I don't know how long it took me, like almost just like under a week. You know, it was, it was just, and you could just go through the story. They've removed so much of the kind of hindrances of the game. I'll go through here, and I will tell you, if you haven't played, or if you've never played, if you've played like Conniff did during launch, this is what they've added since launch to the game, and you can kind of go with me, Conniff, on this. But so here's the first thing is actually completely bogus because they're doing away with it completely. So the first thing they say is an in-game expertise tracker. Well, that doesn't matter anymore because come Rise of the Angry Earth, they're doing away with expertise, which is a really, really weird system of increasing your gear score upon activities that you did, and it didn't really necessarily make any sense. Like you would get, like we did a dungeon last night, and I got a musket expertise raise, and I've never held a musket on my character like ever. So I'm like, okay, sure. So it was very weird. They're doing away with that completely. Before, the only way to really get from gear score 600 to 625, which was the kind of cap. Think of it as like Destiny 2, I suppose, but where you kind of get this gear score that's above even what you're wearing, just from experience and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it reminds me of, like almost season pass XP bonuses that you can get in Destiny 2. They're doing away with that completely. So your gear score is all dependent, or going to be dependent on whatever drops, whatever content you're doing. You know, if you're doing mutated dungeons, you're going to get, you know, higher level gear than someone that just goes out in the open world, probably more like most players. So it just makes more sense to me, and it's a little bit more intuitive. What they have added are heart runes. So they've added a new quote unquote ultimate or a super, depending on, you know, what game you're playing. That these are kind of an alternate ability that you get through a side quest in Brimstone Sands, and they have different heart runes for some of the expeditions that you do, and then you can craft, if they don't drop for you, you can craft these heart runes with materia that's basically salvaged from the gear that you get from these expeditions, and you can increase their level of power from blue all the way up to legendary. But they're like a cannon shot. There's like a bile thing where you spray out poison out of your mouth. There's a entangled vines one. There's a bunch of different little heart runes. If you've watched Brimstone Sands trailers, they kind of feature some of that. Tuning orbs have been removed. So evidently in the game before, you had to get these tuning orbs to even access expeditions. So it was almost like you had to, kind of like WoW, I suppose, where you needed the key to do Mythic Plus dungeons and stuff like that.
Yeah, except
similar to that, but this is just base dungeons that you had to get this weird thing. Those have been completely removed. You can kind of queue up and find there's not really a looking for group system, but there sort of is, which is different even from Guild Wars that doesn't have one either. But at least in New World now, you can kind of click on the dungeon icon and it'll open up a lobby for people that are looking for group, and you can kind of join a lobby and kind of queue up as a tank, healer, DPS, and find a group that way if you want. So I know for me, when I was starting out, I was looking for a group for the first dungeon that you need, Amarine, that you need to go through for the main story. But you didn't necessarily have to do that. There's also solo options within the main story too that you can do. But I wanted to actually experience the dungeon, my first dungeon in New World. So, which I basically just got carried through with some level 60s.
Yeah.
I was just trying to keep up the entire time, one of those situations. But it is what it is. So inventory management. This is a big one because I know that before the system was really wonky. The storage sheds are now linked across every territory. So before you had to put all your junk in a storage shed in a territory. And then if you wanted, you had a limit of what you could put in that storage shed. If you had more than that, you had to go to another territory, put stuff in that, storage shed. But then to access them, you had to go to the different areas to get your junk out of the storage shed. So it's now universal, which I don't know why they just don't open it up a universal bank, like most MMOs, but whatever.
Yeah.
But at least it is kind of neat because you can, if one fills up, you can just say, okay, well, you can click on, say, I'm just going to store this in Everfall rather than Windsward, and you just put all your junk in that. Even if you're in, Windsward, you can just put your junk in the Everfall storage bin, and you can organize it, say, okay, I want all my leatherworking in this storage shed over, in the Eben scale reach or whatever. You can do that now, which is kind of cool. But fast travel improvement. So evidently Azoth was really, really hard to come by, or maybe not hard to come by, but it was really expensive to fast travel, crafting, all of that. Like you were just constantly on the bum for Azoth, like really, really bad. So it's not really that much of an issue anymore. You can you just get Azoth out the wazoo. You're generally almost at max cap, unless you're just doing a ton of crafting or just burning through and fast traveling around the world like a little private jet owner.
Fast travel was really rough though back in the base game. And I mean, with Rise of the Angry Earth, you're going to get the other kind of fix to fast travel with mounts. But it was that was like that one zone that I don't remember the name of that's north of Reekwater, east of some zone that starts with a B that's north of Everfall. I think I blocked them
thinking
from
of
my
Brightwood.
Brightwood, and then whatever's
Weaver's Fen. I pulled up a map earlier, yeah.
Thank you. That zone... Those two specifically, I spent forever in, like pretty much the entirety of level 30 to like 45, because I was just like, I had no money, Azoth. I mean, I had no money for the bus, and it didn't help that the syndicate on the server that we were on at the time was just terrible. It had no central leadership. There was aside from the Lore Seeker Guild, but there was another guild that was kind of like the head of the top syndicate guild, and they imploded, and it was it was bad. So you had to pay extra to fast travel to all these different territories controlled by the Marauders and whatever the other one is. And it was just a battle to okay, I want to go over here, but guess I'm going to be walking this whole time. And so it took forever to do anything, and I was constantly out of Azoth, and it was a pain. So
that's too bad.
If you want a break to rest your weary vocal cords, I can also run through some of these because I've got it pulled up. Since I know, I don't want you to keel over dead in the middle of this recording. Our poor listener, this will be the last time they hear Shiloh's voice. Croak.
So no, I'm fine for now. The reduced housing taxes. So the cost of, I guess, not altered. They're usually 5, 10, 20,000, I think, to buy a house, but the taxes have been reduced. It's whatever. Maybe that matters if you're paying for a really, really nice house. I just have my little free house in
I don't even
Brightwood,
have that.
I think. And I'm like, that's fine. I actually want to get multiple houses because you can get up to 3 and it's free fast travel as long as it's off a cooldown or whatever. But I just have my little house, so I'm fine with that. There's a PvP reward track that is now rewarding. I don't know. I haven't stepped foot in PvP in the game,
and nor will I. It's
kind of bizarre that the game was originally designed to be a PvP centric game, and it kind of has elements where you have these different factions that are controlling territories and stuff. And there's my character just just running around the world. I just don't care about it that much. Everyone knows that.
It's okay. I'm just going to leave that PvP flag off permanently. That's how I approach
I know
this type
it
of
gives
stuff.
you bonuses for doing stuff out in the world if you just leave it on, and most people don't even mess with you, but I don't even want to attempt it.
Yep, that's how I am.
I'll just leave that to Ardeth. Maybe he can show me the ropes on that, but probably not.
I'll just cheer for him on the sidelines.
Yeah. Go, boy. Expedition Group Finder. So this is something that I referenced earlier. So you can queue up for a group, or you can find a group for any expedition or mutation, which I didn't know. So even the higher end stuff, you can try to find a group, which I haven't. Other than that first time, I've done the expeditions with our community, which has been a ton of fun. The dungeons in this game alone are a reason for me to keep playing, which is something that Guild Wars 2, unfortunately, they kind of gave up on. And I don't know why, because they were fun too. I thought they're pretty challenging.
I mean, they got the fractals.
You don't have the Trinity, so you have. I mean, there's a meta that you can follow in Guild Wars 2 that will keep you alive and everything, but it's a little more convoluted. So having a quote unquote dungeon in Guild Wars 2 is a little. I guess they found it was like a little strange, but whatever. I thought they were cool, but they kind of gave up on them. So having actual MMO dungeons that look incredible and the mechanics are fun and they're challenging. Like we're doing these on normal. Of course, we're kind of under gear.
You are under leveled though.
Yeah. But it's still I just love the difficulty curve. It's just spot on. Like it's not so easy. It's just a cakewalk. Although we did one last night, first off, that we just blew through. So, and a lot of that is, we're getting a little bit better and, we're getting good, as the kids say. So, improved performance. So the New World team has made great strides in identification and resolution of bugs and performance issues, which you're having a slight, your performance issue that when you came back has been a little weird, right?
Oh, I don't know if I'm like just misremembering, but the graphic fidelity is worse now than it used to be. I don't know what that could be. It honestly could simply be like, think about what's come out since 2021. That, like I used to play only stuff on Xbox. But then when
that's probably more of what it actually is.
Right, that's what I'm like, okay, well, it's because I've literally played like Remnant 2, which is in Unreal Engine 5, or Jedi Survivor, which is also, top. Now that game had plenty of bugs, but like the way it looked was just phenomenal. I've even played a little Cyberpunk on PC, and originally I played that on Xbox. And so it's probably more that like I'm just simply playing better looking stuff now. But there's a bit like I've pulled up old videos and something's different. And Stark he was saying it had to do with the NVIDIA overlay or something. So I've just kind of ignored it.
For me, I know at least from my PC, which is not, it's kind of, I don't know, what would you say, like mid-grade? I mean, I think I run like a 3060 or something like that, a graphics card.
Yeah.
I bumped up my computer to what it is now, but it's by no stretch of the imagination anywhere top end. Like it's mid-grade to low mid-grade, depending on how you look at things. But it plays everything on high, and I get minimum of 60 FPS.
Yeah,
that's minimum, and usually it's in the 90s. So I mean, it runs really, except for New Corsica City in Brimstone Sands, which everyone agrees. I know Ardeth and I were talking about it. It's like it's stutter rate in that city, and I don't know why. It's pretty heavy population because there's a lot. Well, there were a lot of people just trying to get through Brimstone Sands, coming back to the game, trying to finish that out before the new expansion is my guess, and it's kind of an end game zone. So, but it runs. It looks beautiful when it when you can see everything, but it's not. It doesn't have ESO like shadow people or anything like that. There's none of that kind of stuff. But it's just it gets laggy. But anyway, so changes to salvaging gear. I don't really want to get into some of this stuff, but
yeah, you can just skip some stuff because there is a lot.
Yeah, there's craftable expedition gear, and there's actual gear sets now. There's a transmog system that they just added, I think, in August of this year.
Okay.
I think that's when they added it. Maybe August last year. I don't remember. Or I don't know because I didn't play last year.
He wasn't here.
Mutated expeditions are kind of like vet, hard modes or whatever you want to call it, Grandmaster Nightfalls or Master Nightfalls, the list goes, or Mythic plus dungeons, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. They're more trumped up versions of these expeditions, and they give you better rewards and things. Different arenas. There's the music system, which I think is really, really neat. So the only other game that I've excuse me, damn, run across a music
starting
system.
Listener. You heard it here first.
Yep, death. The only other game I've run across is Lotro, Lord of the Rings Online, that actually has a quote-unquote music system. Can you think of another MMO that has a music system?
I mean, Guild Wars 2 does, but it's not like I watched Arda mess up a few songs. Which was hilarious.
In New World.
Yeah. And so it's
basically Guitar Hero in New World, which is kind of cool that it's a mini game. In Lotro, it was basically people that would try to play things, and there was a mod that you could basically download, or you could plug people that had. I remember my little Hobbit would play Fade to Black by Metallica. In Bree, and that was a lot of fun. But I didn't have to actually play the song. I just typed in / whatever the code was that would link to this ABC software that would play this complicated, system that somebody had programmed in. But this is actually more of a Guitar Hero. And you pick up these little pages for the songs, and you can learn. There's the flute, the lute, the mandolin, the stand-up bass, and the snare drum. And so you can learn these once you learn the pages, and you can join in other people's songs. You can invite other people. It's a lot of fun. I haven't really played with it a whole lot, but they also, certain songs will give you different buffs too. So if you are in this parameter of a quote-unquote bard that's playing this song, you can receive a buff, and then you can tip the bard, and it's kind of a neat little fun role play-esque system. There's a sandworm raid from Brimstone Sands. Brimstone Sands alone is a conversation that we could have. That
maybe next episode with Rise of the Angry Earth, because that was the first big free expansion.
Their free expansion.
New World
and new weapons, the Greatsword, which was added for Brimstone Sands. Void Gauntlet, I think, was added before that. I think they added that, right? Void
Gauntlet got launched like November of it was like a few months after it released or something.
Yeah, just like an update. The Blunderbuss, which was, I think that is a Brimstone Sands, or was that just another update?
The Great Sword was Brimstone Sands.
Okay, so that's the only weapon they added, Brimstone. Okay. So Blunderbuss has been added. New expeditions have been added to the game. I think there's like 4 or 5 of them. One of them we did finished out last night. Barnacles and Black Powder, pirate themed dungeon. Very, very fun. Very cool. So there are now seasons in the game. Currently on season 2, but that will change Tuesday with the new expansion. That'll be season 3. And there's a battle pass system, which I know everyone's like, battle passes, but it's a pretty good battle pass. I'm familiar with them. I know people play Fortnite. It's the same idea. If you play Destiny 2, it's definitely the same. It's almost identical to Destiny 2's, where if you've bought, you can buy like a premium version, or if you like I did with the Witch Queen, I bought basically all the content for a year or whatever, and so you get the premium unlocks for that, which gives you extra goodies down the road. But none of them are game breaking. Some of them are cosmetics. Some of them are, little bonuses here and there, weapon XP boosters, stuff like that. Yeah. So they've added quite a bit. Of course, that doesn't really fix. And they've been slowly adding quests and just more things to do in the early parts of the game, and they're continuing work on the latter parts. So I think they just got done adding stuff to Eden Grove, which is where I met you a couple nights ago, right?
Night. Yeah.
And last night. Sorry.
Was it last night? No, 2 nights. Who knows? I'm old too. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was two nights ago. So yeah, they've done a lot, and another big reason why I initially wanted to get on board was for I know that this is going to be, or at least kind of a testing staging ground for Amazon's Lord of the Rings MMO down the road. We'll get to that later, but yeah, it's from what I've seen, I think they're doing good by the game, and I'm kind of excited, and I've been enjoying it. Like you'd mentioned, it doesn't necessarily have its quote unquote story plot hooks in me, but I do enjoy the elements to the game enough to where I actually do enjoy the lore and story for what it is, even though it's not completely fleshed out like a book, like a good book, like Final Fantasy 14 or even Guild Wars 2. But it's been a lot of fun. So let's talk about Rise of the Angry Earth. I'm going to let you.
Yeah, I'll run through this so you
run through some of the stuff for this and
take a nap.
I'm gonna take a nap. I'll be on my cot back here.
So Rise of the Angry Earth is remarkable for New World in my opinion, one big way, and that's mounts. Now, I'll get to that in a second, because the important thing is that they've taken First Light and they're changing the zone completely. Have they said what its name is going to be yet, or is it Elysian Wilds? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the Angry Earth have risen, and they're very angry, as you can probably guess by their name. And they've taken over the First Light zone, and it's now transformed into the Elysian Wilds. So
terraformed, if you were.
Terraformed, yes. And so there's going to be a new story that kind of follows the main game that takes place in this zone. And so then we get to mounts, and mounts are, in my opinion, probably the most important addition to New World since its launch. Out of all the things Shyla just said, a lot of those are great quality of life stuff.
But you still do a lot of running.
But yes, you do a ton of running around, and it's very
brimstone across sands.
That's been the hardest thing, going from feet. And the sandworms nip at your ankles, But the hardest thing going from Guild Wars 2, even going from World of Warcraft, because we played that in the spring, to then New World is I gotta have mounts. I gotta have mounts.
I press X and I don't get a mount. What's going on?
What the heck? So that's happening. There's new progression, which means your character level goes to 65 now. Your gear to 700, and then trade skills are going to go up to 250. So that'll be fun. And then new faction quests and new faction tiers and all that. In the same way as Guild Wars 2 has legendary items. And what are they called in Final Fantasy 14? Those the really rare, not really rare, but the pinnacle weapons that you can get or something.
Oh, Well, there's several different types, like Zodiac weapons.
I think that's
that
probably
sort of thing.
the comparison, but they're adding artifact rarity for gear and
More like Destiny 2. Like, think
exotic. Oh, okay.
where you can only slot, in Destiny 2, you can only slot one exotic in your armor and one exotic for your weapons. I think it's going to be exactly this. Actually, in New World, you actually have jewelry slots too, and there'll be an artifact you can slot in one of those as well. So you can technically slot 3 artifacts, one in armor, one in weapons, one in jewelry. So, but they all have different little things, kind of like Destiny 2 as well. Like there's there's not as many artifacts as there are exotic weapons and armor in Destiny 2 by any stretch of the imagination, but
sure.
But that could come down the road. I mean, it kind of opens the door for them to do lots of fun things with these artifacts. So.
Yeah. So there's artifacts now. They are adding the flail, which a flail's been a favorite weapon of mine since RuneScape, and Varric's flail, which is part of the Barrows Brothers boss. I guess now it's considered like a boss encounter, but back then it was just like a combat minigame. And flail's just a really fun weapon in general. In this case, it's going to be a healing / tank weapon. More than like a DPS weapon. And so that'll be fascinating because I think now healing, you're basically relegated to life staff and that's it. So
yeah, life staff Void Gauntlet or a life staff. Some people use life staff Frost Gauntlet if they're feeling icy.
But I know you can use the flail with a shield, so that'll be fun.
Yeah,
too.
it kind of opens up the door. Like even on my DPS spec, I don't really use my hatchet on the back bar. It's more of like, oh crap, I can get out of dodge free if I'm quick enough to actually swap to my hatchet and get the defy death perk and hopefully not die completely. But it would be fun to actually have a back bar weapon like that where you can swap out and be like, oh crap, we need this, real fast, and I can add a little extra healing to the melee support because I'm on the greatsword, and I can swap out to the shield and flail and help out the tank, or it offers lots of different fun little viable, and it looks pretty wicked. I'm not gonna lie, the flail looks really, really cool in the trailers and stuff that we've seen so far. So it'll be exciting to kind of play around with that.
Yeah, they're also introducing we talked about the new zone. So obviously that's transformed, but they're introducing a new expedition that's for level 62 called the Savage Divide. So that should be fun. Like you said, I will say, and I didn't touch on this in my experience, but I did play the Amarine expedition, the Starstone Barrows, which I think has changed slightly now, and then the one with Thorpe. And I beat all 3 of those back in the day. And New World or Amazon Game Studios definitely did good work with expeditions. Now, that's almost a separate conversation because back then all I knew was ESO dungeons. And so the fact that Amazon Game Studios did a good job with the expeditions is saying something, because dungeons are probably the best thing ESO has going for it. They do, they put out some decent dungeons with some great, experiences and great challenges. And so the fact that AGS was able to kind of meet that and in their own way is pretty decent. So that'll be good. Looks like a new Heart Rune ability, Primal Fury, which I haven't ever experienced Heart Runes, so that's all new to me. But
yeah, I only have the one, the cannon shot, which you get from the Brimstone Sands. I'm looking at getting other ones. They're just an extra little flair. This Primal Fury one I've seen where you actually grow in size and you kind of ape out. It looks kind of fun and interesting. But I hope they add more and they keep going with it and keep rolling with what they have, because anytime you can add more to a current system that seems to work, go with it and keep running with it. So
Okay. Well, I'll finish up here so we can dive into the next subject. But yeah, they're adding season 3 content. So obviously Shiloh mentioned earlier that the new season starts in 2 days. If you're listening to this episode on release date, one more day and then all of this will be yours. Side note, you still can't pre-order it on Steam, so I'm not sure where I'm not sure what weird. AGS is doing. Like,
yeah, and they've said, yeah, you can. Someone was asking, like, my question was right off the gate. I'm like, why are, as an ESO player, a Guild Wars 2 player, even
any
WoW
MMO
player,
Final
any
Fantasy
MMO
14,
player, takes advantage of buy now and get blah 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 blah, or at least pre-order now and get something out of it, or just to kind of get your, not necessarily a money grab, well maybe it is a money grab, but at least kind of get you on board with what they're doing. They haven't done that. They're just like, yeah, you can buy it day one.
It's just
on October 3rd. That's it. Yeah. There's no, it seems weird, especially when they announce new mounts. Like, that is such a prime opportunity for, well, buy pre-order now and get this special little mount skin. Like, that's a huge no-brainer. Like, why didn't they do that? But especially with Amazon, like,
sometimes I wonder if AGS like actually pay attention to what other developers are doing, because it's like, it seems like a no-brainer. Plus, if you had the opportunity to pre-order, you'd have the data there of how many people are expecting to play on Tuesday, and then you could adjust servers appropriately. So it's just logic, and it doesn't make sense, especially in the industry that we have today, where people always say, like, oh, I'll never pre-order games, they're always bad at the beginning, or that sort of jaded mindset. But like, it's an expansion for a game, like,
it gets people excited. And just like you said, at least your numbers. Like, you don't open a restaurant, you don't stone cold open a restaurant and have like your trial runs without knowing exactly how many people are coming through the door. Like, that's not something you do. You don't just open the door and like, well, we got this amount of food. I hope we don't do more than that, because guess what? You're gonna do more than that, or you're not gonna do anything, and you're gonna be stuck with
bunch of food.
40 pounds of filet mignon, and like, what are you gonna do with all that? It's
turn it into another dish.
it's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I hope, for the love of God, that I hope that Amazon can get through this, and it'd be a decent launch, because if they do, I'll be surprised personally, because I've seen some bad launches for expansions, and I've seen some really good ones. So we'll see where this one falls into place. But
last thing on here are Night Vale, Hollow, and Turkey Terror. I'm going to read the Turkey Terror because it sounds funny.
It sounds like a blast.
Turkalon is back for revenge. Hunt down the Feathered Menace and his foul army to earn new rewards. Turkalon is a giant turkey, for those
It's
who
a
don't
giant raid turkey, everyone.
So
awesome.
We're going to do an episode probably in October about holiday events and games. Now, if you're a listener of our old podcast, GG Party Chat, we did an episode about that topic, and we're going to do another one. It'll be kind of a rehash, but we'll be bringing our experiences with New World's holiday events, sort of Guild Wars 2 a year later. Other stuff, I might leverage Tempest and find out what Final Fantasy has, if they even have it. I don't know, as far as those sort of holiday events go. But we'll do that. And so we'll revisit this Night Vale, Hollow, and Turkey Terror later. But all right, Shiloh, I opened up the show notes, and this little bit was a surprise to me. So do you care to explain yourself? And I'm not in a negative way. I'm just curious.
Oh, the MMO topic
Yes.
for the Eve? We'll just make this really quick. So I just kind of threw this out there. Speaking of expansions, I just wanted to kind of throw out, everyone loves a top 5 list, right? If you don't,
I do.
I know you do, so that's why I threw this out there. This was kind of more to appease to you. And it actually made me think. I'm like, well, what are...
I know, it really did. I was like, man, I really haven't experienced a lot of expansions.
Yeah, what are the top 5 MMO expansions that I've experienced? And a lot of that, if you think about it, some of it has to play with, well, was I playing the game beforehand and then I got to experience the expansion after I was playing the game, because then that is when you really kind of get hyped for the expansion, either in a bad or good way. So I threw together my top 5, and then Conniff will tell you his top 5, which, you know, that the fact that you threw one in there made me think, well, maybe I should restructure, because I didn't really consider Destiny 2 an MMO. But yeah, because I was thinking, well, maybe I should retitle this top 5 MMO or live service games.
I'm really with Destiny 2, I'm really playing in on the fact that they finally admitted, like, once upon a time, like, yep, we consider Destiny 2 an MMO. It doesn't look like an MMO, like what we think of MMOs as, but
yeah,
I included in those conversations because of that claim that they made, the Bungie made.
Right.
So, all right, why don't you go first?
All
then?
right, so I'll be quick about this. My top number 5, I have a kind of a tie. It was really hard for me to not put Path of Fire from Guild Wars 2 in this list at all, because of the biggest factor is obviously the mounts.
Yes,
this was a huge game changer for both the game, and if you look at Dragonflight from WoW, they have Path of Fire to thank for that.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely huge. Before, all you could do was glide, which was still a big deal in Heart of Thorns that they added. But Path of Fire really, really changed with the addition of the Raptors, the Skimmers, the Springers.
Yep.
The
Jackal.
The Jackal,
and
even the Griffin, and then eventually the Skyscale. But...
Roller Beetle too in there.
And the story is good. The zone, up until I started playing New World and got to Brimstone Sands, probably my favorite. And it's still very, very close. Like, they're very neck and neck. And Brimstone Sands is not nearly as big as, say, all of Path of Fire by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
Because Path of Fire is what, 5 zones. And Brimstone Sands is one big zone. But very, very cool environments in Path of Fire. And then the tie, I had to think about it, but one of my favorite experiences of any MMO was going through initial mythic quests for EverQuest 2 for my Illusionist. So every class in the game in EverQuest 2 got a particular mythic item quest that you could go on that basically started you out. You got, say, it was basically this escalating list of achievements or goals that you had to acquire before you finally got your mythic item. And it was this huge, long quest ordeal. I'm sure it was shorter for other people, but it was long for my group of players and hobos that we went through. But it was so much fun, and to actually get it was a huge undertaking. So Echoes of Fadeware was, I think it was actually an update in the game, but it was around that time for the expansion. And they introduced the Fae in EverQuest 2 and a new zone and a new trial that was really kind of wonky and fun. Well, not trial, but a raid is what they actually call them back then. But yeah, so it was probably had to include that in there, because that period of time, it's hard for me to remember. It was almost 20 years ago, but very, very cool. Number 4 on my list is kind of a surprise, but I think back on it, but Mines of Moria from Lord of the Rings Online. The fact that we got to go into the mines of Moria was kind of as a Tolkien nerd, I was geeking out pretty hard and going through Moria, which was pretty expansive. It was really, really a lot of fun. Although it does get you claustrophobic pretty fast. Like, can I just see some sky for once? I couldn't live like a dwarf, but anyway. So number 3, this was kind of an easy one for me. Final Fantasy Heavensward. I have yet to get through all of Shadowbringers, which is on a lot of people's list is probably their top Final Fantasy 14 expansion. So I couldn't put it on there just because I haven't been through all of it yet. When we get there, that'll be probably number 1. But Heavensward, coming off the main story quest in Final Fantasy 14, which is a little pretty drolling until you get to the end, and then things start to pick up, and you're like, all right. Yeah. Heavensward, although you're still in kind of this snowy area, and it's kind of more of a continuation from the main story quest, if I won't spoil anything, but stakes get ramped up. There's some heartbreaking moments, and some of the most epic things that you will ever experience in an MMO happen at the end of Heavensward, and it is absolutely brilliant. That the way everything pulls off is absolutely amazing. Number 2 is, I had to give it credit where credit is due, and that's Morrowind from Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah.
It's when I came back to Elder Scrolls Online, I rolled up my Warden, and 5-6 years later, I don't play the game anymore, but there were some good times. That's where I met Conniff and Swine and a lot of our buddies, and where I fell in with the Lore Seekers, and eventually here we are. But I have to give credit where it's due, and that expansion, although they're trying to get through some of the areas of Vivec City, take a while to get used to, with the ziggurats and stuff like that. It's still one of my favorite zones.
I agree.
MMO.
It's probably aside from my ESO pick on my list, it's probably my favorite zone and expansion.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of my favorite old RPGs from the Elder Scrolls era. The actual title, Morrowind, even though it's dated now, but it was still a great RPG. At number 1, speaking of credit where credit is due, is Heart of Thorns from Guild Wars 2.
Which surprised me. I didn't know you liked this expansion that much.
I did, and it's probably just because the verticality and
it's the best jungle in any MMO that I've ever seen. Definitely the best jungle. It also is kind of the reason I'm kind of excited for Rise of the Angry Earth, because I'm like, well, maybe they'll do a little bit of that, and I know it's not going to be because there's no gliding in the game, and you can't even swim, and it's like, well, they don't have that going for them. But it's just, that expansion was just so much fun. It can be hair pulling. The Tangled Depths you'd say that word to anyone that's ever played Guild Wars 2, and your eyes kind of roll back in your head, and you're like, oh god, no Tangled Depths. But getting through all of that, still, as much heartache as some of it was, it's just absolutely brilliant, the way they pulled that off. And it just totally came out of left field when you think about Guild Wars 2, and think about all of the mainland Tyria up until that point, and then they do Heart of Thorns, and it just changes everything. And then they added with Path of Fire, they added mounts that change everything. They just kind of snowballed everything. They're just brilliant expansion. So my top one was definitely Heart of Thorns. Gotcha. All right, my top 5 MMO expansions. Number 5 is Elder Scrolls Online, and that's 2018's Somerset expansion. So this is I don't want to say it's a shoo-in, but in my opinion, it added a lot of things that I really enjoyed in the game when I was playing it. It's where they did the very first house giveaway in the Grand Sijic Villa, and that's a massive house that you can decorate. It has, it's this beautiful high fantasy elven island. A lot of the quintessential like tall spire castle, you know, things, and like Alinor and other things. Like I just love I love the city of Alinor, the way it was laid out and everything. But then there's like that menagerie of animals area, and there's like a few quests
the
down
little
there.
zoo
The
area?
zoo, yeah.
Yeah, that was cool.
So that was neat. And then Cloud Rest, which of course, like, so I started the game right before Somerset dropped, and so I didn't know any of this at the time, right? But looking back on it, you know, like that's when jewelry crafting came into being. And most importantly, Cloud Rest. And Cloud Rest is and remains my favorite trial in that game. It is no nonsense. It's just mechanics, and it is very challenging on Vet. And in my opinion, it's one of the best ones that they've done, because it's, like I said, like you don't have to fight through a million packs of ads to get to a boss. You know, you just go straight into the fight, or you can make it harder by doing all 3 of the mini bosses in the main final boss fight. And the mechanic for like the upstairs, downstairs, it's just a well-oiled experience.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of frustration in there by other people that we played with, but then a lot of success and stuff. So love Somerset. Number 4 is RuneScape, and RuneScape doesn't do like expansions that like these do, where like this is the expansion, you know, here's all the marketing material. They just have done updates. But this one I think is kind of the catalyst that made RuneScape, or really has set RuneScape on this trajectory that it's now on, for better or for worse. And that is 2007 when God Wars Dungeon was released. So God Wars Dungeon is this place in Gielinor where you needed like either 60 strength, 60 agility, maybe something else to even get to this area. So there's a skill requirement to get there. But then you enter this dungeon, and there's these 4 different factions fighting for this in this dungeon. There was like Saradomin, Zamorak, Bandos, and then Armadil. And each of those 4 that I just mentioned are like the name of the god, right? And then you've got like this holy war happening in this dungeon. And so you'd go into it, and if you were wearing, of course, like this, the first time you go into it, they're all going to be aggroed to you, or you're going to aggro you, or you're going to aggro them. But like if you were wearing an item from one of those gods, you know, like for instance, like if you had a Zamorak cape or something, I don't remember the details, the Zamorak army wouldn't attack you. If you had a Saradomin cape, or I think there was like a staff or something, they wouldn't attack you. And so like there was these little mechanics for like, okay, if you wanted to go fight this boss, you could, and you could safely traverse their area of the dungeon if you were wearing a piece of their gear to blend in. But in order to fight each of those 4 bosses, you had to kill 40 followers of that boss's that general's army. So for instance, the one that I've done the most is either the Zamorak, which is Krill, who's like this giant demon, or Armadil, which is this flying bird general thing. I'm trying to put this into like the most basic terms without getting into the deep lore of this. So long story short, the whole purpose of this is you wanted to kill the generals because they would drop shards of something called a god sword, and each of them would also drop the hilt. And so if you got 3 god sword shards, 1, 2, and 3, plus one of the hilts, with 90 smithing, I think it was, you could, and all of this stuff is tradable Like if you got those drops, you could just trade it to another player if you didn't have the levels. Or you could craft it into this god sword, and at the time, those swords were like some of the most powerful weapons in the game, with some great like special attacks and everything. And so it was just this crazy moment where they introduced like the concept of PVM into the game, and now, you know, almost 16 years later, like PVM is the main draw of RuneScape. So great. Number 3 is the only one that I wasn't around, didn't play for when it launched, and that's World of Warcraft's 2012 Mists of Pandaria. Now, the reason I am adding this to my list, especially at number 3, is because if this expansion didn't happen, my entire experience in World of Warcraft wouldn't have been what it was, because I played a Pandaren monk, and to this day, I think the World of Warcraft monk is probably one of my favorite classes in any MMO I've ever played. Of course, World of Warcraft is more tap target and everything, but the mix of like magic but melee, like I just am completely fascinated with. That's why I was like a Nightblade, an ESO, and an Elementalist using sword, a Weaver in Guild Wars 2. And so like going to visit Pandaria and all those places in that expansion, doing running through some of the raids for transmog, just love that area, love the quests, but more importantly, like I love monk and then the Pandaren race. So and then number 2 is Destiny 2 and 2018's Forsaken. That was probably the best expansion Destiny 2 has ever done.
Easily.
Yeah. They not only was the Tangled Shore a really neat place, it also introduced the Dreaming City. It also introduced the Last Wish, which also brought about Shattered Throne. So not only was Last Wish considered like one of the hardest raids in Destiny, but Shattered Throne was the first of the dungeons, and now Dungeons is a 3-man fire team mini raid that they add.
Yeah.
I think they're adding every year, right? That's kind of their new shtick. And so on top of that, it had a very tragic story. So
yeah.
And then my number 1 is Guild Wars 2 and Path of Fire from 2017. For basically all the same reasons you said, but I think for me, like the mounts, it introduced the best mounts in any MMO, like hands down. The Raptor, just the leap of the Raptor, like it's so simple, yet it's so impactful. Use it all the time. You know, the Skimmer over water, like fantastic. And then when you get the mastery to go underwater, ton of fun.
Under and over.
Like a back and forth. Even like, now you did say the Sky Scale, and that came in Living World Season 4, along with the Roller Beetle. But the Sky Scale is extremely useful, and the Sky Scale plus Griffin is very obviously, like you alluded to, the influence for Dragonflight for World of Warcraft. And so but not only the mounts, like the zones are beautiful. Like when you were saying like Brimstone Sands is your favorite desert zone, I was like, I don't know if I'm just going to disagree with that when I get to Brimstone Sands, because I want Path of Fire, like, you know, all that we experienced, and the hero point grinding and just some of the neat vistas and all that stuff. You know, Guild Wars 2's Path of Fire is pretty exceptional, and the story is pretty great too. So they're neck and neck. The fact that it is neck and neck is saying something about Brimstone Sands. So, because I hold Path of Fire, previously it had been and probably still might be, but those two are really, really neck and neck on the top desert, quote unquote, areas of anything. So All right. That does it. That's my top 5 expansions. Now, I did move this here so we can end with this little cheeky question you added. But
All right.
this topic, I was like, when you put this in here, I totally agree with it. So this is New World. This is sort of the theory that New World is the staging ground or test run for Amazon's future Lord of the Rings MMO.
Or could be, or should be. It probably is.
I think it is. And this is something that Wally, our good friend Wally, proposed to me back in like 2022, I think like January or something, when the New World hype train was careening off the cliff into oblivion. And I was like, that would be Amazon's MMO. No, that would be their MO to put out this game, because they know, like, they're testing the waters with game development, right? Like, this is New World is AGS's first big industry game that has hit all sorts of news publications and content creators and streamers talking about it. Like, it was big, and then Lost Ark and that whole saga, whatever. But New World, it makes a lot of sense, I think. Like, and the hilarious thing is, it would effectively fix my number one complaint about New World, right? Which is my draw to the world itself, like my character's purpose, my purpose. Like, if all of a sudden they just stick it in, say, the Rings of Power universe, the Rings of Power era of Lord of the Rings, and the whole...
Which they're not going to do, but yeah.
Sure.
But even if they did, yeah.
I just say that because they own... Amazon's the one doing that. But that's what I mean. Like, if they were to stick you in that era and in Lord of the Rings, and they're like, okay, like, Sauron is this boogeyman name that hasn't been seen, in forever, but, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's compelling. That's compelling story, and that's a compelling character drive. So I could get behind that. And Stark has been saying the same. He's said that to me multiple times as well. Do you have any thoughts on that specifically?
No, I mean, just the fact that I think it's probably true. It makes the most sense. I think it also keeps me rather positive about the game, because if this is, it's not a bad thing. It's they can continue New World in a positive and use the systems that they want to develop for the future of the new Lotro MMO, or Lord of the Rings MMO. Sorry, I add the O to whenever I say Lotro, because it's easy to say.
Yeah.
But if they can add elements to New World that they can reflect back on, because the game looks great. Like, there's they have the engine, they have some of the systems. If they can just add pieces here and there, test this, test that for the future MMO, they're in a really good spot to make this Lord of the Rings MMO an actual hit. Whether or not they are kind of shooting themselves in the foot by taking the player base and saying, well, we're releasing the Lord of the Rings MMO, play both. Well, I don't know if that's really going to happen.
Yeah.
But at least they can just say, well, okay, we're going to slowly fade our assets from New World and put them all into this. So you can stick with New World if you want, but this is the direction we're going, because I don't see this game coming out any earlier than probably 2026 at the earliest, probably. So,
yeah.
And so
definitely.
you have what is that? 7 years or so of New World, probably, if not more, which is a good lifespan for an MMO, if you think about it. a lot bigger than some that get maybe a year and then they're canned. But
Yeah, and it's hard not to compare it to the ones that have been around for 20 years. So like you mentioned, we talked about Eve earlier. Well, that came out in 2003, so it's been around 20 years. RuneScape, 20 years. WoW, almost 20 years. Final Fantasy 14 and ESO are half that age, but that's still 10 years. Same with Guild Wars 2. And so, yeah, I think like if New World is a testing bed for the next Lotro, to borrow the acronym, I think it's a promising thing because, again, like I said, like it's the bones are there, even the meat's there. There's just no soul for me in New World at the moment. And so if they inject Lord of the Rings into it, that's a ton of soul that's just right there. One thing I'd like to see, though, is a little more complex skill ability bars and stuff like this. And I think like at the time going from ESO to New World, especially being new to PC gaming, New World was like the 3 skills per weapon. That was plenty. Like I was a noob to PC gaming, but now that I've got Guild Wars under my belt, especially in Elementalist, in which I've got 4 different bars, and then certainly World of Warcraft, you know, like I'd like to see 5 at least abilities per weapon.
Oh yeah,
in a Lotro or a Amazon Lotro game. So.
Yeah. I think for me, that's my preferred. Guild Wars 2, anyway, ESO, that sort of 5 ability bar swap sort of thing. I think that's where I really prefer, as opposed to the WoW 8 skill bars, and Final Fantasy 14 does the same thing where it's just so many abilities. Like and that really only works. I mean, it could work in a non-tab target MMO, but it would be really, really hard to pull off, at least for me. But
Yeah.
I think that's the sweet spot. Like 3 is a little too.
I think it's a little too little. There's just
a little too little.
no character
Although
to it.
the combat in New World, I do really, really enjoy. It is, the AI is really good. Those archers. I was talking to Weevil this morning about Angry Earth archers. They're pretty
So annoying.
brutal.
Yeah.
It's like fighting a player. Sometimes they just shoot, jump back. Their tank friend
Dodge,
comes up,
yeah.
and it's like, oh god. But it's very good. But yeah, adding a few more. But that's why having that heart rune. I mean, it's not much, and it's on a pretty decent cooldown. You have to build it up by attacking, and that's how you recharge. It's not really on a quote-unquote global cooldown, but
Yeah.
it does have a recharge that takes a little while to do as you fight. But yeah, so what does New World need to improve upon for you to get to buy the expansion? Because I know you're a little indecisive, and it could just be financially or just like, I don't know.
Part of it is I don't want to spend the money on it. There's just so many other games, plus my Magic the Gathering vice that's clawing away, you know.
Oh,
But
all right.
but the other, and it's not like I don't not want to get it. I'm just really indecisive because I think like going back to it this past week was a bit of a struggle. It took me like way too long to transfer character, and it was just a frustrating process because when I finally went through the hoops, the server that everyone's on was locked. I'm now on it, so that's all solved. But like that whole thing, I was like, this is why I hate, like servers in a game, like where it's like I'm on this world, or I'm on this server, you should join. Like that's a whole topic for another conversation, but I'm not a fan of that. I don't care like the whole community thing that gets built when you have the same people on the same server. I've played RuneScape, and you can have your character freely go to any world in the game, and you will get the same level of community in that game as you can in games like WoW, where you're on a server and you get to learn all the guilds and the infamous players. Like in World 116 or 116 in RuneScape, that's the fishing world. There's this bastard named Lester Crest, who is the most annoying player in RuneScape. If you've ever played RuneScape and ever fished on that world, you know who I'm talking about. That type of thing is more than possible with a system where you create a character that's in their server database and then you just hop to different worlds. And it's also a better system because then you can designate certain servers or worlds as, this is like the world for people who want to do PvP. This is a world for people who want to group for dungeons or something. It just makes more sense. And RuneScape has been doing that for literally 20 years. And if not that, I prefer the mega server structure like ESO and Guild Wars 2 has. So that's a whole thing, and that won't change. But it's not a problem necessarily. So the big three are mounts, which is about to be fixed, and then story, which I don't think will be fixed in the way that I would want, but certainly an improvement with this new one. And then the last one is the ever-present lack of time. So I think that once I get through End of Dragons, my mindset will, in Guild Wars 2, my mindset will probably change a little bit. So I think the main thing is, like, what you're doing in New World with our friends is great, but it's not something I would want to grind out again, like grind to get to. Like, you know me, I play these games, especially MMOs, at like my own pace. I mean, it took us like 3 years before we were doing ESO dungeons at like a pretty high level. And so that's 3 years of play. Like Guild Wars 2, like I'm still working through the story. You finished all this stuff. So I don't know. I'm kind of in a still haven't found what I'm looking for by U2 moment when it comes to New World. So, but I'm not like against it. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right.
I look forward to if I don't get it this first week, I do look forward to hearing your thoughts on this expansion and everyone's thoughts, really. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, this is our longest episode ever, but we have one last thing.
Wasn't planning on that. But yeah.
Nah, it's been great conversation. So,
yeah, hope so.
Oh yeah. I have to hit this thing, right?
Oh, hit the thing.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, class, settle down. It's time for book reports. Shiloh, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, I thank you. I think I will kick us off. So my book report, I actually brought the book with me, like
really?
A good Mr. Rogers.
For our YouTube watchers and viewers?
Yeah. So the book I'm holding up, for those listeners that are not watching my ugly face on the YouTubes, as the kids like to say, is a book called The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. And it's a very, very good book. It's part of a trilogy, I believe, and that I have not read all the way
First
through.
Law trilogy. And it's on my want to read list, Shiloh, on Goodreads. So
it is it's a gritty fantasy novel. So I will read once again,
Chapter 1.
This episode is sponsored by Amazon and Jeff Bezos.
It really is this episode.
Yeah, it's a Jeff Bezos episode. Don't call it that, by the way.
I won't. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but
I don't know. Anyway, so the first novel in the First Law trilogy and debut fantasy novel from the New York Times bestseller Joe Abercrombie. Logan Ninefingers, infamous barbarian, has finally run out of luck. Oh, darn it. Caught in one feud too many, he's on the verge of becoming a dead barbarian, leaving nothing behind him but bad songs, dead friends, and a lot of happy enemies. Nobleman, dashing officer, and paragon of selfishness, Captain Yazel Dan Luthar has nothing more dangerous in mind than fleecing his friends at cards and dreaming of glory in the fencing circle. But war is brewing, and the battlefields of the frozen north they fight by altogether bloodier rules. Inquisitor Glokta, that's always hard word to say.
What a name.
Cripple turned torturer. I didn't know cripple was a PC way of saying. I guess it is. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, even still, like, okay, her or this person's occupation was a cripple, and now they're a torturer. Like, what? That's
Yeah. Well,
weird.
their debilitating thing was a cripple, and now they've decided to turn torturer because that's what you do. You know, when you're born crippled, you just turn into a torturer. Evidently,
This is towing the line.
There's nothing more in life than becoming a torturer.
Apparently.
With nothing better than to see Yazel come home in a box, as torturers do. But then Glokta hates everyone. Cutting treason out of the Union one confession at a time leaves little room for friendship. His latest trail of corpses may lend him right to the rotten heart of government if he can stay alive enough to follow it. Enter the wizard Baez. It's like a book of just like these crazy characters that are a lot of fun. A bald old man with a terrible temper and pathetic assistant. He could be the first of the Magi. He could be a spectacular fraud, but whatever he is, he's about to make the lives of Logan, Yazel, and Glokta a lot more difficult. Murderous conspiracies rise to the surface, old scores are ready to be settled, and the line between hero and villain is sharp enough to draw blood. Unpredictable, compelling, wickedly funny, and packed with unforgettable characters, the Blade itself is noir fantasy with a real cutting edge. And I can highly recommend this book. It is funny, it's gritty, it's a good fantasy novel. It's not necessarily high fantasy, but if you're looking for a good, down-to-earth, well, as down to earth as fantasy gets, and this might be a book that you would definitely should pick up. And it wasn't, I couldn't find one, or I'm sure they exist, of a kind of a colonial based fantasy that kind of similar to New World, but this kind of sprung to mind. So I was like, oh, let's choose this one. So
I have, in my recent fascination with Goodreads and keeping track of everything I'm reading and all that stuff, I have seen Joe Abercrombie name
pop up
many, many times.
Yeah,
He's basically like in the same sphere of influence, I think, as Sarah, what's her face, and then Brandon Sanderson, Sarah J. something maybe, the ACOTAR chick. Do you know what I'm talking about? No, that's definitely not. No. Oh, no, that's the A Court of Thorns and Roses coloring book. Hold, please. Sarah J. Maas, that's the one. So okay. Sarah J. Maas, Brandon Sanderson, Joe Abercrombie, they seem to be in the same like sphere of popularity.
Yeah,
but
I'd say Abercrombie and Rothfuss are about the same level. Different spectrums, but yeah.
I cannot separate Joe Abercrombie, the fantasy writer, prolific fantasy writer, from
the clothing
line that all the popular snobby kids wore in high school. And so it's just like mentally, I'm like,
problem.
It's entirely a personal problem. I want to read this book, but it's just funny to me. It's like that's not the name of a fantasy writer like that you'd expect, like George R.R. Martin, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Joe Abercrombie. I don't know, but no, it sounds sweet. If just the fact, like it's also a trilogy, but like, the character descriptions that you just read sound pretty interesting. So,
yeah, they're good. Definitely characters that you remember.
Yeah, and unlike all the books you had for our Baldur's Gate episodes, this one I could probably actually find at Barnes and Noble without having to.
Yeah, you
order
can actually
on Amazon.
Easily find a hard copy at any
Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually go to a bookstore and buy a copy of this. So definitely recommend it.
Well, thank you. So,
no problem.
that's the episode. Do you have anything you want to add before we turn it in?
No, I think we've bored these people long enough.
I know.
So what are we going to talk about next episode? Maybe a little bit of what I think of Rise of the Angry Earth.
Oh, we're definitely
maybe
gonna,
but
we're definitely going to dive into the Rise of the Angry Earth discussion.
okay.
That's going to be the focus of the episode. I don't know if we'll add we probably won't add the VG face-off, but I want to talk about, and for our listener, all that there is, like your experiences, maybe mine, but certainly your experiences with, because I'm not even level 60, so I wouldn't get there anyway. Your experiences with the mounts, the new zone, all that jazz. This is the first new major paid expansion for New World, and
Yeah, it's the new world.
yeah, the new world. So
The
that's
new paid world.
That's pretty serious. So, well, thank you, listener, for chatting with us, for almost witnessing Shiloh's decetion. That's the word I'm using.
Yeah.
I'm sticking to it. Okay. And we'll talk to you in the next episode. Peace.
Yep. Questing the Multiverse is brought to you in part by Conic Productions, House Wood Designs, and Joel Crawford. To follow along with our adventures, please follow us on Twitter at QTM Podcast and consider joining our Discord, the link of which can be found in the show notes or in our Twitter bio. Want your questions or comments read on the show? Email us at questingthemultiverse@gmail.com. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a review or a follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.